Orange Cassidy is one of the best characters in professional wrestling. And regardless of what you may hear online about Cassidy or his gimmick being too lazy or the absolute abomination that is going to kill professional wrestling, the fact of the matter is, over the last 5 years, Cassidy has endeared himself to the AEW audience in a way that not many wrestlers have. And he has done it while also leaning into the very criticisms that many more pure wrestling traditionalists have had about him. When Cassidy first burst onto the scene in AEW, the likes of Jim Cornette and many others criticized the gimmick as something that was too lazy to be in professional wrestling. Orange Cassidy, of course, was a guy who did not seem to care about professional wrestling. The Orange Cassidy character was slow-moving, slothish, and didn't really have a reason to give a crap about what was happening before him. That is why his early appearances in AEW seemed to be just him standing with his hands in his pockets, looking cool as a cucumber while the action happened around him. And people pointed to this and said that this is what is wrong with pro wrestling today. It is lazy, it is ineffective, it is a joke. It was a criticism that led up to his first match in the company at Revolution 2020, which is when the tide really began to change, because at that pay-per-view, he wrestled Pac in what many believe to be Cassidy's breakout match. Now, Cassidy, of course, had wrestled on the independent scene for years and years before this. He even had a stint in Chikara as Fire Ant, where he had some of his most infamous appearances in professional wrestling ring. But when he had that match with Pac, it solidified Orange Cassidy not just as someone who can go in the ring and who has proven that he has the ability to a broader audience, but also, and more importantly, it laid the foundation for what the Orange Cassidy character would become, because the laziness, the slothish nature of Orange Cassidy wasn't just something he did because he was just a stupid dude in professional wrestling who didn't care and because he really had no reason to care. It was mind games the entire time, and we saw that slowly but surely as he wrestled the likes of Chris Jericho, as he wrestled the likes of Jon Moxley. He began to show not only more fire in his matches, but an intensity that in no way resembled the man that we saw in 2019 when he first appeared in All Elite Wrestling. Just go back to the pandemic when his feud with Jericho happened. Orange Cassidy really showed that he had the chops to help carry a feud. He was in there with a legend like Chris Jericho, who had just celebrated his 30th year in professional wrestling, and at a time where Cassidy could have very well gotten lost in the shuffle and lost in that feud to the enigma that was Chris Jericho, he shined bright as the enigma of this feud, because this is when he got his first real promo time in AEW. This is when he got his first real big time beating in AEW, being bloodied and bruised by Jericho and his associates during that feud. And that, again, elevated Orange Cassidy to a level to the point where he was perceived as a guy that if you make him mad and you make him flip that switch, he can hang with the best of them. And there is no better example of this than his international championship reign. Orange Cassidy, for months in 2023, carried AEW TV, carried AEW pay-per-views, having the best match on the show night after night after night. He was the workhorse of AEW, the guy who everyone had chastised as killing the business and as someone who doesn't belong in professional wrestling, who made a joke out of professional wrestling, proved that he was indeed one of the best pure in-ring pro wrestlers there is in the world. And not only this, he did it while being one of the most over guys on the entire roster. Orange Cassidy's appeal goes beyond just professional wrestling. If you look at the most viewed videos on AEW's YouTube channel, hell, some of the most viewed videos on AEW's Twitter, you will find a common thread that Orange Cassidy is at the top, or at least near the top, of nearly every one of those categories. And that is because his appeal goes beyond just professional wrestling circles. He's got a unique look. He's got a unique vibe. The aura that he has, it may not be the one that we're used to in professional wrestling, but it is aura nonetheless. And while all of that is important and makes him a very marketable babyface, the cherry on top is the character development that I had mentioned earlier. Orange Cassidy leaned into every single criticism that was levied against him. And in the match he had with Jon Moxley at All Out 2023, went out there and had arguably one of the matches of the year, showing a fire that even rivaled some of the best in the business at the time, and doing it all while in the midst of one of the greatest title runs in AEW history, and while also telling the story that he was the guy carrying the company, that he was the guy wrestling night in, night out, and that he is simply tired. Tired of the critics, tired of the pain, but most of all, tired of carrying the company on his back. And that is what made his victory over Moxley in the subsequent match they had at Full Gear mean even more, because Orange Cassidy proved that he is a babyface who can come back from adversity. And then his match with Jon Moxley at Full Gear 2024 proved that Cassidy had the chops to deliver an emotional and visceral performance. And for the guy who everyone said doesn't care about professional wrestling, for the guy who everyone said doesn't belong in pro wrestling, the reason that the Orange Cassidy character went out there, challenged Mox, and went out there with such fire was because, in his views, in the character that he is playing, he was defending pro wrestling from the Death Riders, from Jon Moxley, and from something that is going to kill AEW. Orange Cassidy's evolution as a character is something that we rarely ever see in pro wrestling. Someone who, and I think while he may not have won the AEW World Championship at Full Gear 2024, I do think that there are big things on the horizon for Freshly Squeezed. But I guess we'll see.